So recently, my friend Goodwin, an atheist in India and a keen observer of American culture, reached out to me. He was confused by a glaring contradiction. Republicans freed the slaves, and Democrats opposed it. Yet today, the parties seem to stand on opposite sides of that same racial and political spectrum. And the nice thing about a foreigner asking you these questions is that they come with no preconceived baggage. It forces you, as an American, to dig into the facts and explain this monumental shift clearly as you can. And if you tell most Americans that the Republican Party once led the fight to end slavery, they'll kind of look at you like you're rewriting history. But that's true, right? Abraham Lincoln was the first Republican president, and he issued the Emancipation Proclamation. So, how did that same party become the political home for white evangelical conservatism and for some of its fringes, the preferred identity of white nationalists? And how did the Democrats, the party once dominant in the segregated South, become the face of civil rights and inclusion? It's one of the most misunderstood shifts in American history, and behind it, quietly shaping both sides, was religion. It didn't cause the switch, but it translated it. It provided the moral architecture for every major turning point. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So thanks for tuning in. My name is Mike Smithgall. I am the unelected mayor of Atheistville, and this is today's Mic Drop. All right, let's start in the 1850s. The Republican Party is brand new. It's growing out of the ashes of the Whig Party and the anti-slavery movement. Lincoln's election triggers the South's secession. This wasn't a secular debate, it was a biblical fight. Abolitionist Christians in the North preached that slavery was a sin against God and humanity, and they quoted Galatians 3:28. So let me go ahead and gift that right now. Look up Galatians 3:28 with my fingers formerly wrinkled by holy water. Galatians 3:28. There is neither a Jew nor Greek. There is neither bond nor free. There is neither male nor female, for ye are all one in Jesus Christ. There we go. So that little bit was used to include everybody, basically. They used that to argue that all humans bear the image of God and therefore they deserve freedom and equality. Meanwhile, ministers in the South used the same Bible to defend slavery. They skipped that awkward Galatians passage and they went 4 pages over to read Ephesians 6:5. So let's go ahead and read that, shall we? Servants, be obedient to them that are your masters, according to the flesh, with fear and trembling, and singleness of heart, as unto Christ. King James Bible. So they argued that racial hierarchy was part of God's natural order. Both sides believed that they had divine sanction. And Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation was strategic, and it also reframed the war as a moral cause. The Union wasn't just fighting for preservation, it was fighting to end an evil institution. But here's the key. The Republican Party of the 1860s were the reformers. They were using faith to challenge the status quo. The Democrats were the conservatives, defending tradition and the South's way of life. So when Goodwin, my friend, asked, how did the parties switch? The answer begins here, with 2 groups of Christians reading the same book and coming to opposite political conclusions. And that pattern, religion used as a moral framework for power, never disappeared. It simply changed its affiliation. So after the Civil War, Reconstruction attempts to rebuild the nation integrate freed slaves. But this only hardens the divisions. White Southerners begin building a new regional identity, heavily wrapped in faith. They saw themselves as enduring punishment while maintaining purity against the outside, against federal interference. And they weren't just resisting authority, they were defending what they believed was God's order. The Democratic Party became the political home for this identity, and religion provided the spiritual fuel. Southern churches, especially Baptists and Methodists, taught that racial hierarchy was natural and biblically ordained. This fusion of faith and regional resistance created the roots of the Bible Belt. Meanwhile, black churches in the same South became sanctuaries, centers of education, dignity, and resistance. They use the same scripture to preach liberation and equality. Once again, the two sides derive conflicting theological claims from the same source. The Democrats controlled the South through Jim Crow and religious justifications, providing white Southerners the language to say, we're not just defending our culture, we're defending God's plan. All right, quick pause. If this conversation is landing with you, please consider subscribing. Atheistville keeps growing because people like you want a place where we can talk about belief and doubt and reason without the usual noise. And it's free, and it helps others find us. And there's something else that matters far more than you might think. Leave a comment. I actually read them, all of them. And whether you agree with me or you think I am completely wrong, I will engage you like an adult. And that's the whole point. Your comments also tell the algorithm that real people care about this content, which means more people get to see this. And that's very important to me. And one last thing, if you know someone who would benefit from hearing this, share this episode. Maybe it's a friend who's questioning. Maybe it's someone who's still in their faith, but they value the honest dialogue. Sometimes the best conversations start out with, hey, I heard this thing that made me think about something. All right, let's get back to it. All right, so now you fast forward to the 1940s through the 1960s. The Democratic Party starts to change, with leaders like Truman and Kennedy and Johnson supporting civil rights and desegregation and voting equality. This fractures the old coalition. White Southern Democrats, or the Dixiecrats, didn't just disagree with policy, they believed it violated divine order. The preachers reinforced this from the pulpit. And at the same time, black ministers like Martin Luther King used religion as a language of liberation. His speeches were sermons, his marches, acts of faith, rooted in justice and equality. Two groups, same scripture, completely different interpretation. When Lyndon Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act in 1964, he reportedly said, "We have lost the South for a generation." He was absolutely right. Southern white voters didn't leave the Democratic Party over economics. They left because they believed Democrats had abandoned a religious imperative. The Republican Party was more than happy to welcome those people in. And this is a pivotal moment. Democrats became the party of federal intervention and civil rights. Republicans began attracting voters who viewed that intervention as a moral threat. The fight wasn't just about race, it was about who gets to speak for God. And that battle defined the realignment. In the 1970s and 80s brought another major shift. The social revolutions of the 60s and 70s, including civil rights, women's rights, and of course 1973's Roe v. Wade decision challenged traditional authority. It created an opening for conservative religious leaders. Figures like Jerry Falwell and Pat Robertson built movements like the moral majority, blending religious language with political activism. They argued America was losing its soul and Christians had a duty to take back the nation. Now, Ronald Reagan, who wasn't overly religious, but he was religious, he understood, though, the moral symbolism, and he spoke the language of faith fluently enough to make evangelicals feel heard. The Republican Party became not just the party of free market, but the party of God and country. And this is crucial. Religion stopped being about personal conscience and became a tribal identity. Being a Republican started to mean being Christian for millions of voters. Democrats, meanwhile, leaned into pluralism and the separation of church and state. Religion moved from shaping the parties to defining them. And if you were a conservative Christian, the Republican Party became your moral home, and the Democrat Party became the opposition. Dare I even say, the enemy. Political strategists realized that moral language mobilizes voters far more effectively than policy details. Faith wasn't just influencing politics, it was becoming the politics. Which brings us to today and the rise of Christian nationalism. This is the belief that America was founded as a Christian nation and should remain one. It's not primarily about personal faith. It's about political dominance dressed in religious language. Just look at the rhetoric. The same claim to divine will that defended slavery is now used to oppose reproductive rights. The same divine order that justified segregation is now invoked as an opposition to LGBTQ equality. The claim that we're a Christian nation is used to justify exclusion and control. Many religious Americans are deeply opposed to Christian nationalism, but the political machinery that fused religion with Republican identity has made that very hard to separate. And here's how this answers my friend Goodwin's questions. The parties didn't just switch over economics or geography, they switched over their moral claims. The Republican Party of Lincoln used religion to fight liberation. The Republican Party today uses religion to fight for control. The Democratic Party of the Jim Crow South used religion to defend oppression. The Democratic Party today uses secular frame to defend pluralism. Religion didn't cause the flip, but it provided that language of righteousness. Once you understand that, American politics start to make a lot more sense, albeit no less maddening. This was never really about policy. It was always about power, and religion has always been the most effective way to make power sound like holiness. So, Goodwin, there's the answer to your question. The parties flipped because their moral coalitions flipped. The Republican Party of Lincoln used faith as a rallying cry for liberty. But as the moral landscape shifted, it became the party that absorbed the religious identity of the segregated South, using scripture for control. The Democrats went the opposite direction, shifting from defending Jim Crow to championing a pluralistic vision. So you ask this question without bias, without baggage of growing up here. And it's the only way you can really see it clearly. Because as an American, if you grow up inside one of these camps, you inherit the story that makes your side seem like the hero. Look, I'm not a historian. So if you want to dig into this deeper, I highly recommend this book right here. It's Religion in American Politics, A Short History by Franklin Lambert. So that's my 2 cents for today. It's unblessed and unfiltered, as always. When you look back over history, through it all, religion was a spiritual engine. It gave abolitionists their authority, and segregationists their defense, and Christian nationalists their political power. And if we don't understand how that moral authority gets weaponized, we'll keep mistaking power for piety and control for conviction. All right, I'm Mike Smithgall. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch you on the next one. Before you go, make sure you like and subscribe to the show and tell a friend. It really helps us grow. If you'd like more great content from us, be sure to check us out right here on YouTube. You can also find us wherever you get your podcasts and check out our blog at atheistville.com. Until we talk again, remember reason and compassion go a very long way.